events. And we have had tremendous interest in this webinar. We have guests joining us from all over the world. So welcome and thank you for being here. So for those of you that don't know, Phoenix Philanthropy is an international fundraising consulting firm. We've served more than 180 clients in the areas of education, human and community services, healthcare, environment, arts and culture, and human rights. We love coaching our clients and providing them with the tools that they need to really optimize their fundraising performance and their organization's impact. So again, my name is Kendall. I'm a consultant for the Phoenix Philanthropy Group, and I have a long history with our guest today, Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, or SARC. I've been working with them for over a decade on their annual fundraising event, and I'm thrilled to have Maureen Jordan, SARC's Chief Development Officer, joining me. Welcome, Maureen. Thanks for being here. It's been a joy to work with Maureen and the team at SARC, and what I really appreciate about Maureen is her passion for SARC. So Maureen, for some of our guests that are out of town and don't know about SARC, can you just please tell us a little bit about SARC?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jerry, for having me on, and thank you to the Phoenix Philanthropy Group for allowing SARC to share a little bit about our virtual breakfast and what we do. So SARC mission is to advance research and provide a lifetime of support for individuals with autism and their families. And what that means is we service clients as young as 6 months all the way to a 50-year-old that's looking for employment. We also have an entire research department that focuses its efforts on diagnostic services, clinical trials, and research on our own programs.
An amazing organization. Thanks, Maureen. So why are we here today? And I think as we've all navigated through a pandemic over the last 4 to 5 months, our worlds have been shaken. We've not only had to deal with how this has affected our personal life, but also the well-being of our nonprofits. I know so many of you have had to slash your budgets, furlough employees. You've had to figure out how to adapt programming to an online and virtual platform. And all at the same time that you've had to worry about how you're going to raise funds for those programs. I think we've seen a number of nonprofits that have either postponed, rescheduled, or canceled their fundraising events altogether. And I think for some of you, it's been really hard to envision how an online event can generate the same energy, passion, emotion, and community that you feel with an in-person event. And I think for others, it's just overwhelming. It's hard to even know where to begin, but we are here for you and it's time to move forward. So today our goal is to inspire you and provide you with the tools that you need to move past your fears and to embrace the opportunities. So we want to start with a quick poll to find out why you're here today. So let's launch the poll. So we just have 3 questions. Are you here today because you're already committed to doing a virtual event, you're thinking about doing a virtual event, or you're home and just looking for something to do? And trust me, that's okay too. I get that. So please submit your answers. We're going to take a few minutes while you all are submitting your answers. And Amy, who's our wonderful person in the background that's going to be getting our results here for us soon.
Yep, we're almost there.
Okay.
Alrighty, we've got about 86% of voters.
Okay, why don't we launch those results? So it's great to see so many of you that are already committed to doing a virtual event, and really so many, 41% that are actually thinking about doing a virtual event, and gosh, only 3% that have nothing else to do. So we promise that we'll even entertain those of you that are here just because you're looking for something to do. So before SARC made their decision to go virtual, they had everything in place for their in-person event in May. Their theme was Picture This. So Maureen, I'd love to have you tell us a little bit about SARC's community breakfast and everything that was in place for your in-person event.
Yeah, so 2020 is our 22nd annual community breakfast, and it's a significant part of our overall fundraising. It's about a third of our fundraising revenue that comes in every year. It's usually attended by 15 to 1,600 guests at the Arizona Biltmore. The event is always been free to attend, and there's always an ask at the breakfast every year. So like I mentioned, the Biltmore was secured. The date was for May 1st. We'd already solicited a lot of those sponsors and secured the speakers as well.
Yeah, so then the world learned about coronavirus. You had to postpone your event, and you went through the process of really determining what was next. So how did you get to the decision to go virtual with this event?
Yeah, it took us a little bit of time to decide to go virtual. Beginning at a board meeting, actually at the end of March, the initial thought was to try to reschedule for an in-person event in September. And then 2 weeks later, we had a meeting with our breakfast committee, who really helps guide this event and has done so since the beginning. And we heard from our families, some of the members on that committee we service at SARC, and they said, you know, we're just so grateful to SARC for not abandoning us during this time, and that we were still able to get treatment in a safe way. And there is a story to tell there. And so we really got courage from them to switch the event virtual, and did so the middle of April.
Okay, great. So I think this slide really perfectly illustrates how the team at SARC was feeling at that time, and probably how a number of you are feeling right now. I think at some point you just have to believe, cross your fingers, and dive right in. So let me set this up. It's mid-April. SARC has 4 weeks to pull off a virtual fundraiser, and there are a number of decisions that needed to be made very quickly. And it started with a theme, Here for You. And yeah, we did completely ditch all of the theme that had been done before, the program, all the speakers, because we decided to tell a completely different story that was more relevant to the times that we're living in. And the story that we were telling was really about how SARC was able to quickly change the way they provided services from an in-person model to primarily online services and therapies for hundreds of their families. And we began identifying those families and adults that were willing to share their story. And then we had them actually record videos on their iPhones. And those short clips were what we really used for our final video. The next thing, we decided that in order to be effective, the program needed to be short. So initially we were thinking we could do it in 15 minutes. That wasn't realistic. And so we elected to go with 25 minutes. And this is for a program that is normally 90 minutes. So Maureen, what were some of the other decisions that needed to be made really quickly?
So we really needed to do a lot of research. So as you can imagine, 22 years of a community breakfast at the Biltmore, that was a well-oiled machine. And so we needed to figure out, are we going to do a live event, virtual live event? Are we going to do a combination of live and pre-recorded, or all pre-recorded? And we needed to research those platforms. So how are guests were going to register? How are they going to watch the event? What streaming service should we be using so that it's an easy viewing opportunity for our donors to attend? We kept our co-chairs the same, so the leadership remained intact, the committee remained intact, and they really helped drive that registration list for us and working with our table captains. Another piece that we did prior to inviting everyone was, let's try to get breakfast donated for this event, because we normally feed everybody breakfast. So we worked with OSO, which is a local restaurant in Phoenix, and we had offered free breakfast burritos that morning that you could pick up outside in a safe way, and then bring them home and eat your breakfast burrito while watching the breakfast.
And the burritos were delicious. So in our experience, there are 7 key components to a successful virtual fundraiser. And we're going to go into all of these in more detail this morning, but they are team, sponsors, donors and guests, communications, technology, storytelling, and the ask. So let's start with team. The most important member of your team is your project manager. And depending on the size of your nonprofit, this could be your executive director. It could be your development director. whoever you choose, it needs to be the person that has just amazing organizational skills, has insight and knowledge of your donors, because this person is really going to be involved with every aspect of the event. So Maureen, being the organizational guru that she is, was the project manager of SARC's event. So Maureen, why don't you talk a little bit about some of your other team members?
Yeah, so we have an amazing team at SARC, and really due to Danny's leadership, our president and CEO, we really have a culture of philanthropy. So I'll go into details on, who produced the event and how that happened, but I just want to, give a little shout out to the amazing team at SARC, because they all really do support this event and make it a success. So first on the team to produce the event is what we called our tech advisor. So that was somebody on the development team who was able to research the platforms for us and then do all of the testing. So we would upload videos in advance. We chose the pre-recorded option. So we would test that on the website, make sure there was no glitches, and then also research what's going to be the best platform to use to stream the video. We also always use a graphic designer. So our marketing and communication manager, every year she works with a graphic designer to make sure that every event we have the messaging just right, and the theme is graphically represented in everything that we're sending out. So making sure that's done in a meaningful and a professional way. And the next, our videographer. So he is the one that put the video together for us. We did film a few of the speakers in person. A lot of those testimonials obviously were done through the iPhones because we couldn't do it in person, but we were able to film the opening, the ask, and our president and CEO visionary speech in person with a videographer. And he put that all together and included all of our sponsor slides and any facts or anything we wanted to share. Put it all together for us in that 25-minute video that we launched for the virtual event. The next person I'll discuss is our database manager. So the person responsible for building out the registration website is also the person that took on many questions. So as you can imagine, switching to a virtual format, tech support is very important. And so people wanted to know, how do I do this? How do I go watch it? How do I register? So she was there to help support that. That's a big piece of moving to a virtual event that's really important. And then also on the back end, making sure, not a lot of these platforms connect right into your database. So having to enter all of those gifts afterwards. And then lastly, our creative director. And for our creative director, as Jerry mentioned at the beginning, she's been our creative director on this breakfast for the last 10 years. And so we are so lucky to work with her. She always helps us come up with the theme, the messaging. She coaches our speakers. She helps them deliver their speeches in the best way possible. She works with the families this time to get their iPhone videos and, asking the questions with our adult clients to make sure that we were really telling their stories. She also created a tip sheet for everybody for using their iPhones. So what kind of lighting do you need? How do you set up your camera angle? And then ultimately, when we got down to it, we had about 2.5 to 3 hours of video that we needed to clip down. So Jerry helped us alongside our videographer, and as well as our president and CEO, Danny, and we all worked together to make that final cut down to 25 minutes.
And that's not a process. So let's move on to sponsors, because we know that there are a lot of questions about sponsors. And the good news for SARC's event, they had 51 sponsors, and only 2 of those sponsors dropped out. And that was really because of financial stress due to COVID. So we think that some of the advantages for a virtual event for your sponsors are the fact that it's an opportunity to be seen by a much broader audience. And in addition, your video is going to ultimately live on YouTube or whatever the streaming platform might be for a very long period of time. So that gives your sponsors a lot more identity and all of that than they would typically have in an in-person event. So it gives them greater exposure for a much longer period of time. So Maureen, how did your sponsor package differ from what you typically offer your sponsors for an in-person event?
Yeah, so for us, the good news is not a whole lot differed this year. The one thing that they didn't get was parking, which is a big deal. That morning, we see about 1,600 people. So can you imagine they get VIP parking with our sponsorship? So that was something that we unfortunately couldn't fulfill. But since the majority of our sponsored has already been secured for an in-person event, we wanted to make sure that we individually contacted each sponsor and made sure that they knew that we were going virtual, what that meant for their sponsorship benefits. And then we also gave them the opportunity to move their sponsorship over to 2021, and nobody selected that. Everybody wanted to support SARC and the virtual event, felt like it was still a great exposure point for their sponsorship. And like Jerry mentioned, we only had 2 drop out, and that was really just for financial reasons. It really had nothing to do with the benefits we were offering. And the great news is I feel like they actually got a little bit more visibility than they would in an in-person event. So they were still included in all of our emails. They were on the event page. They were highlighted on social media leading up to the event. And then another benefit of sponsorship is an ad in our outreach magazine. And that's an annual magazine that's published and sent out to about 14,000 households. So they were still able to get and receive that benefit. And then every year we do a sponsored dinner, and we obviously weren't able to do that this year. And so instead of giving a little thank you gift there, we had volunteers from the breakfast committee help send out COVID COVID-related thank you gifts. So that said, thank you for protecting our mission, and had masks and hand sanitizer and things like that in it. And people really loved that as an additional touch point post-event.
You guys always do such a great job with your sponsors. So, so consider what you can offer to your sponsors in your sponsor package. You know, identify all the different components of your event, starting with your communications. And what are some of the parts of your event that you could offer to a sponsor? For example, if you're doing an online event and an auction, that could be a sponsorship opportunity. So just, we encourage you to get creative. So let's talk about audience, our guests and donors. And this is SARC's event from last year, and you can tell it's a full house. But the good news is that you are no longer limited to the size of your venue or your budget. You can send your invitation to everyone in your database. SARC had people from all over the world attending this event. So Maureen, why don't you tell us how you were able to manage the process and some of the metrics for your event?
Yeah, so for us, it really starts with our table captains, and that didn't change in a virtual format. They were just virtual table captains for us, and they weren't limited to 10 to 12 guests like they would be at the Biltmore. So we really worked with our table captains. We had about 70 participate in the virtual event, and they were able to invite guests from all over. And we saw, you know, great response to that. And then also just making sure that everybody, you know, that we didn't lose sight, and that as you plan for your virtual events, that you don't lose sight of those individual donors, and trying to secure those larger gifts before the event. So we still had, even though we couldn't meet in person, we were still working, our CEO and I were still working on securing those larger gifts, those lead gifts going into the breakfast, and cultivating those donors prior. I think that's really important, and not to lose sight of that. On the day of this, we ended with 1,200 guests. So not as many as we see in person, but still a really good turnout for our first virtual event. That morning, the event went live. We had 6 people log on. And the really neat part about that is the 600 people that were on that morning, they were on for that full 25 minutes. We didn't see a big drop off at any point. Even when it got to the ask, they stayed on and they listened and they watched the whole thing. For visitors that day, so at the website, how many people came and visited that site that morning? We had about 2,100. And then a week later, we had a total visitor count of 5,100. So from a visibility standpoint, we had a lot of traffic on that page. We had 419 donations the day of the virtual breakfast. And then I'm going to get into a few more statistics here for you, just to kind of give you an idea of how our other fundraising totals came in. So average gift size in 2019 for SARC was $305. And in 2020, we were at $351. So we saw an increase there. We also saw an increase in our multi-year gifts, and we call that our MVP Giving Society. And in 2019, we had 26 versus 31 in 2020. So we saw an increase there. And what that means is a donor that's making 1,000 or more commitment to SARC for 5 years. We also saw an increase in our percentage of donors that give. So in person, we usually, in 2019, we saw 64% of the room give. And then that morning we saw 70% give. And then we stuck with, making sure that you do your donor calls right afterwards, that you're promoting your event on all the society magazines. And we also created a blog post on the event where the video lives as well. And we actually saw a donation come in this week. So, we're months behind the event now, and we still see donations come in, which is really cool. So making sure that shelf life for your event, you create a blog, or there's a way for people to still access it. And a lot of the questions I get, that's great. I'm so glad it was so successful for SARC, but what do you think, what do you attribute the success to? And I think it's twofold. I think first and foremost, we did a really good job of sharing SARC's story and being authentic to what's going on in the world right now and how we're helping the people that we are supposed to be serving through our mission. And so I think that really resonated with guests. And then second, I think opening it up to families that we serve, and that they could invite their relatives, their grandparents, aunts and uncles from all over to be able to help participate in this way where they normally wouldn't in the morning at the Biltmore.
Yeah, and I think as a side note, if you typically charge for your event, you might want to consider making this a free event, or at least lowering your ticket price. So that allows people that haven't attended your event in the past to kind of have that peek under the tent and really learn more about your nonprofit. And who knows, they could become some of your next really important donors for your organization. So in general, because this is a relatively new format for many of your donors, be sure to communicate clearly, simply, and often. And in this section, we'll talk about your event page, vehicles for communication, and your communication timeline. So Maureen, give it to us. What's your advice for the best communication strategies?
Yeah, so for us, it started with the event page, making sure that your first contact with this new virtual format is easy and understandable. So we chose to use MobileCause because we'd been already using it for a few years. And that's actually, it was a one-stop shop for everyone. So you registered through that website, you could make your donation through that website, and then the live event was through that same website. So just making sure that whatever platform you choose, that it's very simple for people, and making sure that your required fields for registration and for donation are minimal. Don't require a lot of things for them to make a donation, because you might lose donors if it's too much for them to fill out in this online format.
So what were some of the things you asked them to fill out?
So for us, it was really important to have their cell phone number. So that was a required field, and their name and their table captain. So that was important. We wanted to make sure we knew where the guests were coming from, and that we had a way to text them for reminders and donations. So those were our required fields.
Okay, great. So we do believe that there will be a lot of virtual fundraisers in the fall, creating a lot of competition. And the event page is really one way that you can set yourself apart. It really does set a tone, and it's one of the first touch points to engage your donors. So get the most out of your event page. So you're not just using this for your RSVPs. It's really an important place to share some of your most important information, those important facts about your mission, your accomplishments, a place to highlight your donors. If you're doing a silent auction, you can highlight some of those unique silent auction items. If you're doing an evening event and have a special cocktail, you can connect with your local mixologist, have them do a video of making the cocktail, and post that on your event page. So, really, I think that you want to just have fun, get creative, and stand out. So Maureen, tell us about all the ways that you promoted your event.
Yeah, so we really took to, because we didn't do a printed invite for this, really took to social media and all the different platforms that we have at SARC. And so just don't be limited to your, again, your initial guest list that you would have. Pull a wider audience list, and then make sure when you're communicating through these different channels that you're tweaking the messaging a bit and making sure you're not using the same photos for Facebook as for Instagram, as for LinkedIn, because those are very different messages that we should be communicating on those channels. So for example, Instagram should definitely be more photo focused, less text. Facebook can take a little bit more text and has a little bit of an older audience now. And then LinkedIn, thinking of that as more of your professional community. So why would they want to come and support the event, and what message should be going up there?
Okay. And we can't emphasize enough the importance of being crystal clear with your audience on where and how to log in and watch the event. I've seen so many events lose donors because they just don't clearly communicate something as simple as how to watch the event. And also know your audience. If you have an older crowd that's not tech savvy, think about how you can assist them. So SARC has a grandparents group, 300 people in the grandparents group, Maureen? And they love to attend the in-person breakfast. And SARC did special trainings and made phone calls to their grandparents to make sure that they could attend virtually. The next thing is developing a timeline and strategy for your communications via email and social media. So this is all you, Maureen. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'll take you through like a high level timeline for communication with your guests and potential guests. So for us, we normally send a formal invitation 6 weeks out for any event that we do. But because this was in a virtual format, we decided 4 weeks was actually a better timeline for us to invite our guests. So that's when that initial invitation went out to all of our guests and our table captains to start getting guests registered. We then sent a follow-up email to the people that did not register yet. So just making sure you remind people to register again. And then instructions on how easy it was going to be to watch the event. So we even included, bookmark this this bit.ly link to your web page that's easy for you to go back, right? Little tidbits that makes it easier for the donor or the guest to come watch you on the day of the event. Same thing a week out, that was more on how to obtain your breakfast burrito, reminder to register, mark your calendar, it's coming. The day before, very specific to how you were going to log on and a reminder. The hour before was also an email, same thing, log on, make sure you know how to log on and a reminder for the event. And then 15 minutes before the event was to start, we actually pushed out a text message through MobileCause with the link of how to join. So there was multiple ways we were communicating with people to just maximize attendance that morning. And then after the event, just making sure that that communication doesn't stop. So for us, we did thank you calls afterwards. We also sent a thank you email with a survey. So that survey really helps us for the following year to see what went well, where are some areas we could improve upon. And then also just making sure you post it somewhere that it can live on and people can watch it beyond the event date.
Okay, thanks. So let's move on to technology, and there really are a number of platforms that are doing this well. First, you have to decide all the elements and components that are important to you for your event. As Maureen said earlier, making that decision on whether or not you're going to be pre-recorded, if you're going to be live, if you're going to do a hybrid of the two, if you're going to do a silent auction, if you want your event to be public or private. So really consider all of those different components that are important and begin researching the streaming platforms and fundraising software. So Maureen, just please walk us through that research.
Yeah, so for the development professionals that are watching this, I get emails, quite frequently with different platforms, different options that we could use. And I mentioned earlier, we went with MobileCause, but there's OneCause, there's GiveSmart. There's a lot of different options for depending on if you have auctions or not, or if you're running a peer-to-peer model. There's a lot of different functionality and platforms that you could use, and just making sure that you pick the right one for your organization. One differentiator and question I would have while you're looking through those platforms is making sure that they have really good, reviews, and that you have like a referral source, so somebody else that's been using them. The other piece for me is the technology or the tech support, right? So who do I call if there's an issue, and can I get anybody on the phone? I think that's a big piece, and that was a differentiator for us. And then also just using technology. It's really great because you'll see the benefits of the donations like right away, where in the past you've had to use pledge forms or other ways to calculate your donations. With all these platforms, you're instantaneously know how you're doing on the event. And then for the live streaming, again, a lot of different options there. You could go the webinar route like what we're on today. You can do Vimeo, you can do Twitch, you can do Facebook Live, YouTube premieres, Facebook premieres. There's just a lot of different options. And so again, doing your homework there, making sure you pick the best platform for your event. And then if you are combining live and pre-recorded, I think that there are a lot of great production companies in your area that could help produce that with you, so that you do have that tech support in the back in case anything goes wrong with a live event.
Right. And I think that Maureen mentioned that we used all pre-recorded, and it was really because we were chicken and we wanted to really control the outcome. But Maureen, what would you say for your next event? Do you think that you might do some live?
I think it's nice. I think that was the one feedback that we got in the post survey is, might be nice to have a live component as well, but it worked out so well as a premiere that, it works both ways, but it would be nice to try to do a live component.
Yeah, okay. So let's move on to telling your story. And so as we all know, sometimes it can be a challenge to create audience engagement, even for an in-person event. But when you pivot the experience to virtual, you're suddenly, just really competing with a number of different distractions, anything from enticing news feeds to online shopping, and laundry can even create a temptation for your remote audience. But it doesn't mean that you have to settle for low engagement for your virtual event. So here's a few tips for an engaging program. And the first is keep it short. For all the reasons that I just mentioned, your donor's attention span is short. And we're starting to see data that shows us that you are going to start losing people after about the first 15 minutes. So it's better to have a shorter program and leave your guests wanting more. We recommend no more than 30 to 45 minutes. And that's really depending on what you're including in your program. And just know that every minute is critical real estate. Use every minute wisely. And second is share your mission with compelling stories. And you want to keep those short too. So your speakers should be no more than 3 to 4 minutes, and your video should be no more than 2 minutes. And you can reuse some of your videos, but make sure that you clip them down to 2 minutes if they're longer than that now. And third is rehearse a lot. And if you're pre-recording your speakers, there's no reasons why your speakers can't speak directly into the camera to deliver their message. That's the advantage of doing pre-recorded, is you can do a number of takes. And so you want to take advantage of that. And also make sure that your speaker's script has all the right messaging and that they've practiced their delivery before they arrive on the day that they have their taping session. That's always very helpful. And for your client testimonials, it's really easy for them to use their iPhones. And even though you might be having your event when things are a little bit more opened up and you have a little more flexibility, I think that this was one of the areas where it was a real aha moment for SARC at how easy it was, the time saving, the money saving aspect of it. And all we did was ask SARC's clients to send us a few videos. We took the best clips of those videos to really reinforce the message that we were delivering. And as Maureen mentioned before, we do have a guide for being able to produce better iPhone videos. So if you're interested, let us know in the chat box. So as mentioned earlier, SARC's theme was driven by their story of resiliency during COVID-19. And that was the message that we wanted to reinforce with every speaker and every testimonial. So Maureen, could you just quickly walk us through the program?
So this is the program that we sent out the day before the event, so everybody knew what they were going to be watching the next morning. So it started by a welcome from our co-chairs, and then one of our co-chairs shared a little bit more about her personal story with SARC and their family's journey with autism. And then we went on to more family testimonials. We heard from our president and CEO, Danny Open, who shared how SARC's programming and services have changed due to COVID-19 and where we were headed for the future. And then we shared more client testimonials from some of our adults. And then we finished by having a board member who also has a personal connection and share and his story, and then also do a really strong ask.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. And just a few more tips about telling your story. As you are developing your message, think about your why. What's your purpose, your passion, what inspires you and drives every decision you make in your organization? And the how is the work that you do and how you move the needle, achieve your outcomes, and make that difference for your clients and for our community. The second is be authentic. And I know that not everybody's going to agree with me on this point, and it is kind of a pet peeve of mine, but avoid using hosts or speakers that might be your local celebrities, but aren't connected or familiar with your organization. I think in all the virtual events that I've watched, the ones that have really compelled me to give were the ones that had real people attached to the organization that shared their passion for the organization. I think that we're all looking for real right now, and it's just a lot more comforting. So, no canned applause. Trust me, I've seen it, and it is not good. I think that the other thing is when you get to emotion. So virtual events do allow you to be a little bit more fun, more upbeat, but make sure that you mix in those elements of emotion to connect your audience with your mission. And that can be done through your testimonials, your speakers, and your video. So we've talked about the why, the how, your speakers, testimonials, and now it's time for that call to action. It's time to let your audience know what they can do to help. So let's talk about the ask. It's been really surprising to me how many of these virtual events I've watched that have not really had a great ask at the end. So many get caught up in talking about their auction items and other components of their program that they forget to do a powerful ask. So here's just a few tips. Number one, just ask. Just do it, just ask. The second is, as Maureen said, the secret to a good ask is really finding the right person to do it. For SARC, it was somebody that was very connected to the organization. It was a dad who had a son with autism. He was real, he was passionate, and he was able to clearly outline all the ways that people could support SARC. So I would say if you have a chance, please check out SARC's program and specifically the ask. We're going to send it to you in an email, a follow-up email tomorrow. So please check that out. And if you feel compelled, donate. Right, Maureen?
Yeah.
Are there other things that you'd like to add, Maureen?
Yeah, so on the topic of donating, making sure that it's easy to donate. So for us, when it got to the ask, we really made sure that that we scripted him for that part specifically to let everybody know how they could contribute. So they received a text message from us that we actually pushed out. So we didn't make them text in, we pushed a text message out to everybody with the donation link. You could also easily donate right from your screen. So there's a donate button on the webpage you were on, and then also embedded in the video, you could also donate by clicking a link there. So it was really easy for people to complete their gift. And that's why I think we saw an increase in average gift amount and how many gifts we got in and percentage of giving, because we made it super easy for people to contribute during that time in the program that we were doing the ask.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is really know your audience. So SARC left the ask at the end of the program, which was about really 17 minutes into the program. And it worked really well for SARC. You know, that was a great financial success and they know their audience. But I've seen other organizations ask a little early in the program, which with something as simple as a text to donate banner at the bottom of the screen. So again, you know your audience and you know what's going to resonate best for them. And I think that another reminder is that because, again, this virtual event is going to have a long life on YouTube or whatever your streaming service is, don't forget to embed ways for people to donate. You could have someone that is watching this video 6 to 9 months down the road, and you want to be able to give them an option to be able to donate and easily donate. As Maureen said, they just received a donate this last week. So that's kind of proof of the point. So when we get to lessons learned, I think what we learned through this experience was the best elements of an in-person event can really be replicated online. So I would encourage you to think about those components of your event, those that you love, those that your donors cherish, and how can you evolve those into an online experience? And again, this is the time for innovation. So, and it's time to have some fun with this. So we talked about opportunities. So we're here. We're going to tell you about the opportunities. And, you know, again, we talked about the fact that you aren't limited to the size of your venue. You have an invite list that can go from your typical 500 to 5,000 or more just by asking your guests, table captains, your board, even your sponsors to share your invitation for your virtual event. Maureen?
Yeah, and just think about all the money you save on providing breakfast rolls or lunches to people. You greatly reduce your expenses on a virtual event. Everything from your venue to your food to your printing cost, AV costs. If you offer alcohol during your event, there's a lot of things that you definitely reduce. And for us, we actually save 95% of what we would normally spend on that event. So even more money went to the bottom line. So all those dollars raised, more of that went to the bottom line. And then you're also reducing the burden on the staff. As you can imagine with any event, even if it's a 50-person event, it's very labor intensive for your staff and your volunteers. And so what we saw there too is not as many staff hours having to be spent on it, and they could focus in other areas.
Okay, and you know, I think that the other thing too is it really reduces the burden on your guests. So if you have an in-person morning event, some of your guests are juggling kids, work, and just life in general. And with your evening events, you have to get a babysitter, that new dress, shoes. I mean, come on. But many of our attendees shared that it was fun to relax at home and really enjoy the event with their family. And it encouraged a lot of conversation about what they were learning. So it was really a very special moment, and they didn't have to battle traffic. I think that there's also a lot of interesting new metrics to consider beyond the typical number of guests, the size of gifts. You can start thinking about measuring the number of visits to your website and why that's important, and make sure that your website is going to be ready for the traffic that you're going to receive. And, you know, also for in-person events, I think many of you are still probably using pledge forms. And while you can still do that with a virtual event, by encouraging your guests to donate through your fundraising software, you're going to see more immediate results. You know, SARC saw results like the minute the breakfast ended, and it was pretty exciting to watch those results come in. And also, it really streamlines the process for your accounting group and has a tendency to really save a lot of time on that front too. So we'd love to answer your questions now. We know that there are so many topics that we didn't get to today, like auctions and greater audience engagement, more sponsorship ideas. So if we've talked about doing a virtual event part 2, so if we don't get to your questions today and you'd like to hear more, please respond to the survey that we're going to be sending out tomorrow via email. So Amy, tell us about those questions.
Yes, we had a lot of good questions, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. first question is, would you mind elaborating on the difference between the tech advisor and the database manager?
Maureen, I'll let you do that.
Yeah, so for us, what we call like our tech advisor is normally the person that produces the event too. So they work with the AV team when we're on site at the Biltmore, and they run the program, make sure the speakers are up, the videos are going, all of that fun stuff. And so they kind of switched to the person that researched all of the platforms for us and then uploaded the video for us, and made sure all the technology was in place so that we could actually have that virtual event. And then the database person for us is actually more so on, just think about segmenting your donor list, what a traditional database manager would do. But they also served in a help support function, right? So if anybody had any questions on how to register or what to do, they were the point person to be able to answer any questions from the guests. So I hope that clarifies it. And depending on your size of your team, you might be all of those positions, or you might have 2 or 3 focusing in on, those members of the team. That's just how we set it up at SARC, and wanted to give an example of kind of who is responsible for what, but it might be, just a few people versus individuals for each one.
Great. And I know that this event was pre-recorded, but a couple people were asking about the table captains and breakout rooms. Is that something that you would maybe recommend during a live event where then they can interact with the people that signed up for their table?
Yeah, Jerry, do you want to answer that one? Or?
Go ahead, and I'm happy to jump in after.
Yeah, so we didn't do that for ours. I do think it's an interesting idea and something that I think people should test out. It would be nice, I think, more of maybe a pre-event thing or a post-event thing. So maybe probably post-event, if people wanted to stay on and network and still get together with their tables and say hi, have a cocktail, or talk about what just happened. I think that is a good opportunity to continue that conversation about what they just saw and the mission, and then be able to see their friends in a smaller setting, or see their corporate sponsors all together. There's just different ways that you could do that, and I think it is worth exploring. We didn't do it, but I think it is worth exploring.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting idea. And I think that if it's something that you do want to explore, you add that to the list of the components that you want to make sure that your streaming service is going to be able to handle. And, as Maureen said, I think it's really interesting to do it after. I think it's also interesting to do it before, have a way. It's almost like for an evening event, you could almost do a little cocktail party and, have your table captains in each of these chat rooms. Now, again, SARC has 120 table captains. So I don't know if there's a streaming service that would be able to handle that, but I do think it's a really interesting idea, and something that you might want to start with, just doing like a virtual happy hour to see how that might work with doing individual rooms for a happy hour. So I would test it out before I go live with it.
Great. And then we do have a couple questions about the burritos and the way that those were provided. So how did you go about that with the restaurant in regards to, did people have to sign up to make sure that they were making enough?
So for the burritos, it was great. OSO has actually been a partner of ours. So thinking about your existing partnerships, that people that already know you, already know your mission. And so they were an existing partner of SARC. And we said, so the way that we did it was actually, once you registered, you got a separate email that asked you to sign up on which location you were going to. So we offered it in Gilbert, which is a city in Phoenix, and then we did the Arcadia location. So you picked which location you were going to, and that was actually set up as easy through SurveyMonkey, and it was just on the honor system for us. So once we had everybody's count of where they were going, if you showed up that morning and you said, "I'm here to pick up my breakfast burrito," you got your breakfast burrito, and we had a lot of people do that. I was surprised by the amount of people that went. And then also just for them, they're not open in the morning. So the people that were going there were going there for the SARC event. It wasn't a confusion there. Like, they knew that's why they were there.
And I think by offering some kind of food, whether it's breakfast, whether it's some kind of dinner or even a lunch, you know, it really kind of adds to the fact that this is an event. It's not just a video that you're going to be watching. It's something that, you know, there's something very special about that. And the other really nice touch that SARC had was for the Arcadia location, SARC's president, Danny Openden, was there to greet the people that were coming that morning for their burrito. And so even though it was a socially distanced greeting, he was there and able to say thank you for the people that were going to be participating. So really nice touch.
And then we did have a question. I know, Maureen, you mentioned it, but for maybe anyone that missed it, what was your timeline on this? How much prep time did you have? And if you had more time, what would you recommend the timeline be?
So we had 4 weeks. So it was, I mean, it was quick. And we really are very lucky to have Jerry help with it. Because if we didn't have her, it would have been really hard. But yeah, we had 4 weeks. I mean, generally speaking, when we start planning for any of our events, we have an event in April or May, and we start planning in September. So that's kind of the lead time there, and that won't change for next year. So whether SARC can have an in-person event or not, we start on table captains and sponsors and theme and all of that. We start in September.
Yeah, I think that, you know, just to add on to that, again, the program itself and really developing the theme and all of that, that was 4 weeks. But as Maureen said, you know, the sponsors were already secured, the table captains were already secured. So, you know, you do need that time up front with all of that. So, and if we could have had a little more time, that would have been great, but, but we made it work.
And I think the only thing we would have done differently maybe is maybe do a live component of it, but maybe not. So if we had more time, we might have done that.
Great. And then a good follow-up question to that one is, what are the table captain's responsibilities during a virtual event specifically?
So yeah, so we actually have, I'm happy to share it too. We have a one-pager that goes through what they're responsible for. And really it starts early on, right? So whether it's a virtual event or an in-person event, those table captains are signing up to introduce people to SARC. And the first introduction point is actually through a tour of our campus. And then they move that, the goal is whoever came on that tour would be the same group that would be invited to the event. So that's how it worked again for us this year. Their responsibility is to introduce new people. And people that have affinity towards the organization and have capacity to donate, or have you know, need to be educated, like teachers or other medical professionals. We see a lot of different community members coming in to just learn more about what SARC's doing and what's going on in the field. So just keeping that in mind. So a lot of our partners come in there too, but really their sole responsibility is to introduce new people to SARC.
Great. All right, and then let's see. Did you consider incorporating messaging about donors making grants from donor advised funds to secure larger contributions?
So we do that on the front end. So a lot of our, I shouldn't say a lot, but a lot of our lead gifts. So we have a challenge match usually at the end when we're doing the ask. And a lot of those, a few of those gifts come in through donor advised funds. And then also if we have, when you're in person, we do have an option to pay through your donor advised fund on our pledge form. With the online format, we don't have that option. So I do think it's important to know those donors, know that if they do have a donor advised funds, that you're making sure that you're asking about that. But I think it is a good point for us to look at, if there's a way to incorporate that as like a checkbox or something, where they can still, say they want to commit to the breakfast, but it's not going to come through like as a cash donation right then.
Great. All right, and we have one final question. Let's see. So We are in Phoenix too, this person, planning on doing a majority pre-recorded by having their MC auctioneer be live, announcing donors, live ask, and auction. Can you recommend a production company that you use locally for Phoenix?
You know, I've noticed that there are a number of groups that are kind of starting to get into this. And I know that PSAV, who SARC has used in the past at the Biltmore, they are starting to do more virtual productions. And I'm sure there are many more. You know, we're happy to provide you with some more information on that. So let us do a little bit of research, and, you know, we'll put your name in the chat box or email me. Again, my email's on this slide. And we'll get you some additional information. So great questions. Oh my gosh, we appreciate so much that we're all here today. Feel free again to contact me with any questions you might have. It's Kendall at phoenixphilanthropy.com. Our thanks to SARC, and especially Maureen. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here today and sharing your wisdom and experience. It's been fantastic. And for all of you that are out there watching, and thank you for being here. Be safe, stay healthy, and thank you so much for the important work that you do every day to make our world a better place. So we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.